Hello everyone! Today we'll be doing something a little bit different, where we will be fusing the two main things this channel is all about, guides and lore, where I will make you a guide for the lore. So today we will be going through everything that you need to know the lore of World of Warcraft. So we will go through every source, every book, every game, every comic book, every short story, every manga, everything. Quest lines in game, how to do the quest lines in game, remove quest lines in game. I will make a list of everything, and after that I will tell you about how you can obtain all of these materials. Before going into the video though, note that in the description below I will link a Reddit post with all these stuff linked, links to everything, how to get everything. So basically this video in an abridged text form. So take a look at that, bookmark it if you want to keep track of the lore, as it's easier to track everything in text format than going through the video again and again. Now with that being said, let's get into it. First of all, we got the book Rise of the Horde by Christie Golden. This book basically describes the lore of Horde before Warcraft 1, which is why we're starting with it. There is a slight part of the book that takes place between vanilla World of Warcraft and the Burning Crusade, but disregard that, you can read that later, you can read it now, it won't spoil much if you know WoW at all. But this is basically our jumping off point, and right after that we will be going straight into Warcraft Orcs and Humans. But first, before playing the game, you should read the manual for the game, because it has some cool lore tidbits, and it basically, it's a foot in the door to the lore of the first war. Now, the years in this manual are they're in a different format than the years that we use today in World of Warcraft, because now the timing convention is before and after the Dark Portal, and the one used in this manual is different, so just don't be confused by that. After reading the manual, you can go ahead and play Warcraft Orcs and Humans. Now, Warcraft Orcs and Humans has two campaigns, an Orc campaign and a Human campaign. Now, the Orc campaign ending is canon, however, in the Human campaign there are still some elements that do happen in the lore, so I would play both campaigns just in case, but note that the Orc campaign ending is canon. Right after this we will be reading the book The Last Guardian by Jeff Grubb, which basically describes the first war from the point of view of Khadgar, and also we see a lot of Medivh, who you probably know from the game if you play the game already. It's basically very, very important lore that lays the foundation for every lore that goes after this. And right after that we're jumping into another game, Warcraft 2 and its expansion. But first of all, read the manuals for both the Tides of Darkness, which is the base game, and also Beyond the Dark Portal, which is the expansion pack. So you read the manual for one, then you play the campaign for Tides of Darkness, the Human and Orc campaigns, then you read the manual for Beyond the Dark Portal, and then you play Beyond the Dark Portal campaigns. Now everything here pretty much is canon, except some slight details that change later in the story, but most of it is canon, and it's a good thing to play through. However, if you don't like how the RTS games have aged, you don't really have to play Orcs and Humans in Warcraft 2, but I definitely recommend it just to get the complete picture. Either way, if you don't want to play Warcraft 2 for whatever reason, its events are covered in two books, which we will now be reading. The first book is Tides of Darkness by Aaron Rosenberg, and the other one is Beyond the Dark Portal by Rosenberg and Christie Golden. These two books are basically the story of Warcraft 2 and its expansion, just from a more in-depth and a personalized view from the characters that we already know, and it's kind of a continuation of Rise of the Horde, as Christie Golden wrote both Rise of the Horde and co-wrote Beyond the Dark Portal. Right after this we are finished with the second war, and we're covering the period between the second and the third war, and we will be doing this first with the book Lord of the Clans by Christie Golden, which introduces the character Thrall, who is instrumental in lore going forward to this day. So very important book, you gotta read it. After that we got Of Blood and Honor by Chris Metzen. It further talks about the relations between the Horde and Alliance, between the two wars, and it's a nice book that deals with the character of Tyrion, who you probably know from the game already. Then we got the book Day of the Dragon by Richard A. Knack. This book is great, I love this book. It has that D&D vibe where there is like a party of heroes going on a big adventure to basically save the Dragon Queen, so definitely recommend this. This book will have a couple of sequels later, but we're not focusing on that right now. Next thing we will be doing is play Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos and its expansion, The Frozen Throne. Now these two games are bundled in Warcraft 3 Reforged, which is the remaster that came a couple of years ago. People really dislike this remaster, but I personally really enjoyed it, but I don't really play PvP, I only play the campaign. So from the story point of view, it's really solid. It's usually on sale, that's also why I recommend it, and you can't really get the classic games digitally anymore, so you would have to get Reforged. Reforged also has some new areas, new NPCs, new boss fights even, which really, will be referenced later in the story that was written after this. So when they made the classic games, they didn't have that in mind, but they changed those in Reforged to better fit the future stories. Either way, next book we have is Arthas, Rise of the Lich King by Christie Golden. Definitely a top tier book, one of the best books in the Warcraft universe, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people. It basically shows the Third War from the point of view of Arthas and the aftermath of the Third War from the point of view of Arthas. After that, if you wanna get into the character of Vol'jin a little bit, who was introduced in Warcraft 3, we got Vol'jin the Judgment short story by Brian Kindragan, which is just one of these many leader short stories that came out during Cataclysm, which take place during different times in the Warcraft lore. They're kind of optional, but they're nice to read. So in this point of history, we would be reading Vol'jin the Judgment. After that, we got the period between Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft, which is covered mostly in the book Cycle of Hatred by Keith R.A. De Candido. After reading this book, we got the War of the Ancients trilogy by Richard A. Knack. Now this book takes place 10,000 years in the past, however the characters from the current time, as of writing of that book, have time traveled back 10,000 years ago to the War of the Ancients, and this book is kind of a soft sequel to Day of the Dragon, as some of the characters from that book appear in this trilogy. Then we got the comic series Ashbringer by Mickey Nielsen, which introduces Ashbringer, both the sword and the character, and it's really something fun to know when you do vanilla World of Warcraft and Wrath of the Lich King later on, so I definitely recommend reading this comic book. Next up we got the short story War of the Shifting Sands by Mickey Nielsen, Road to Damnation by Evelyn Fredrickson, and also Visage Day short story by Steve Danuser. And after we are done with all this reading, we can go ahead and play World of Warcraft Vanilla. Now, to fully experience World of Warcraft Vanilla, what I recommend is going and downloading World of Warcraft Classic, picking a Classic era server and playing 1 to 60 on both Horde and Alliance. You do all the dungeons, you do all the raids in order of progression, and you will see most of the story. To better keep track of the story, I recommend downloading the add-on called Questy, which will mark all quests on your map, and you can find them easily, and you can basically read through them and do the whole story. Now there is one important quest line called the Scarab Lord quest line, which you probably won't be able to do unless it's a fresh realm. This quest line is basically regarding the opening of Ankh-Iraj, and once it's done, and no one can do it anymore. So there are many cool videos on this topic. My favorite series is the one by Barney64, so go look up Barney64's Scarab Lord questline and you would be good to go. You can also go ahead and read a little bit about it on Wowpedia if you like. Next up we got World of Warcraft The Burning Crusade. So first watch the cinematic, then I recommend going to retail World of Warcraft, doing the starting zones for Blood Elves and Draenei. You can also read again that part of Rise of the Horde that takes place during this time. And then you will go to Chromie and pick a timeline, basically pick an expansion to level through, and you will pick Outland, and here you will want to do 1 to 60 on both Horde and Alliance to experience the full story, as there are important characters introduced in both sides of the story. You can open the adventure guide and do all the dungeons and raids that you see here, besides Black Temple, Magister's Terrace, and Sunwell Plateau. Now, while you're doing all of this, you can do some reading. There are a couple of manga that we will be reading. First, we got the Sunwell Trilogy by Richard A. Knack and Kim J. Hwan. We also got the Shadowwing manga, 2 parts of it, by Richard A. Knack and Kim J. Hwan, also manga. We have this manga called World of Warcraft Mage by Richard A. Knack and Ryo Kawakami. and also a short story called Unbroken by Mickey Nielsen. We also have another leader short story that I mentioned earlier called Lortemar Theron in the Shadow of the Sun by Sarah Pine. Now, when you're finished with all this reading, we can go back to the game. You should go ahead and look up the trailers for patch 2.3 for TBC. Then after watching that, you can do Black Temple, then watch the trailer for patch 2.4, and then you go to Shatrath and go to the portal to Quell Danas. You do some quests here, just get introduced into the story a little bit, then do the Dungeon Magister's Terrace, and finally do the raid Sunbell Plateau, and with that we are done with the Burning Crusade. Now, exploring stuff before and after and during the Burning Crusade, we have the book called Illidan by William King. We also have the book Night of the Dragon by Richard A. Knack, which is a sequel to Knack's earlier work, Day of the Dragon and the War of the Ancients trilogy, as a lot of the same characters appear here. We have also a very important World of Warcraft comic book series. Now, this comic book series had 25 issues. It covered very important lore, especially for King Varian Wrynn. However, some of the lore here is straight up not canon anymore, specifically the lore regarding the character Medan. So whenever you see stuff with Medan, you can read it, but know that his stuff is not canon, as he's totally disregarded by the writers, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't exist anymore. There is also a thing where his staff is the same staff that Khadgar had later, and that was obtainable in-game, so it's kind of hard to say, but even the developers are making jokes about him, so he's pretty much not canon. Tying into this comic is the Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch questline, which is also removed from the game. You can look this up, just see what this was about. It was basically the Scourge invading, capital cities and stuff and spreading the plague. We have a World of Warcraft Death Knight manga next by Dan Jolly and Rokyo Zuki. This manga covers a period from the Third War up until the Borean Tundra zone in Wrath of the Lich King, and it's from a point of view of a character called Thasarian, which is one of my favorite WoW characters of all time. We also have a book, or rather a graphic novel that was released a little bit later but takes place during this time, which is The Pearl of Pandaria by Mickey Nielsen and Sean Galloway. After that, we can go ahead and do Wrath of the Lich King. So again, I recommend going to retail, going to Chromie, and picking a timeline for Northrend. But before you do all of this, the first thing you should do is make a Death Knight on whichever race that came during Vanilla or Cataclysm. So no Draktyr, no Pandaren, and no allied races. Because the starting zones for those are slightly different, and this starting zone takes place a couple of months before Wrath of the Lich King proper. So, as I said, when you finish the starting zone for Death Knights, you go Chromie time, you pick Northrend and do it on Alliance and Horde 1 to 60. Now, at one point you will be doing the zone Dragonblight, and its story culminates in a big cutscene called Wrathgate. Now, after Wrathgate, there used to be a questline called Battle of Undercity, which is removed from the game for whatever reason. You can still do this questline on World of Warcraft Classic Wrath of the Lich King, but I don't think it's worth the slow leveling. If you right now we're playing on story mode, okay, so we will be doing everything as quickly as possible. So I recommend reading up on Battle of Undercity or watching a video about it online. Then you can do all the dungeons in Northrend except Icecrown. When you do the raids, you can do the Eye of Eternity first, which basically ends the story of Koldara. Then you can watch the trailer for patch 3.1, do the raid Ulduar, then watch the trailer for patch 3.2 and do some Argent Crusade dailies in Northern Icecrown and associated dungeon and raid with it. This is kind of optional, but it's story, it's basically filler story where they pick the champions who would, go into Icecrown Citadel, so for the sake of completion we are covering it as well. Then you can watch the trailer for patch 3.3, do the dungeons in Icecrown, so first do Forge of Souls, then Pits of Sauron, and lastly do the Halls of Reflection on Horde and the Alliance, as there are some slight differences. Then you can go ahead and do Icecrown Citadel on both Horde and Alliance for those same differences. And then you can do the optional raids, as I call them, in Wrath of the Lich King, which are the other raids in the dungeon journals. So, you know, Vault of Archivation, Ruby Sanctum, Obsidian Sanctum, stuff like that. There is some lore in it, but, you know, it's not really essential to the game. But, you know, for the sake of completion, we are covering it as well. After doing all of that, we are back to books again. Read the book Stormrage by Richard A. Knack, which is kind of a soft sequel to the War of the Ancients trilogy, but the Night Elf side of the story. But this takes place between Wrath and Cataclysm, and it's really one of the good books. It was one of the first books that I got physically myself, so I have a soft spot for it. We got another class manga, World of Warcraft Shaman. After reading that, you can read The Shattering Prelude to Cataclysm by Christy Golden, which, as the name says, is the prelude to the Cataclysm expansion and sets up a lot of the story, which is referenced later in Cataclysm, which was not seen in the game. Now we have the leader short stories I talked about earlier. We read some of these already. Here is a full list of them. You don't have to read this. You can read them. They add new nuance to the story and everything. But most of them are filler content. But the last one you would want to read is Sylvanas, The Edge of Night. Now this book, this short story, is extremely important for later story, especially in Shadowlands and the like, so be sure to take note of what happens during Sylvanas, The Edge of Night. Now we got another comic book series, Curse of the Worgen by Mickey Nielsen and James Wan. It introduces the Worgen characters, the Gilneas, or rather continues the story of Gilneas from Second War and what happened to them and the whole curse thing. That will be a big thing in Cataclysm. Now we got an optional manga called Warcraft Legends. This manga had 5 issues, and it's basically a bunch of stories taking place during different times in the Warcraft timeline, but none take place after this point in the story, so this is why we're reading it now. It has some cool tidbits. I really enjoyed reading this. This is actually one of my favorite pieces of literature regarding WoW, so, you know, you can read it if you like. Now we got 2 comics. Now these comic books were initially supposed to be a continuation of the original comic book series, however they repurposed them to be standalone. First one is Dark Riders by Michael Costa and Neil Googe, and the other is Bloodsorn by Doug Wagner and Jeremy Rapak. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But after we are done reading some more, we can go back to the game and do Cataclysm. But first, we will do the starting zones for Worgen and Goblins. Now, Cataclysm was the revamp of the world, so we will be doing entire Eastern Kingdoms and entire Kalimdor again. So you go to Chromie, do Chromie time, and do all of Kalimdor and all of Eastern Kingdoms on Horde and the Alliance 1 to 60. Then you can go ahead and do the max level zones, which are Mount Hyjal, Vashir, Deephold, Uldum, and Twilight Highlands. Do all the dungeons except Zul'Gurub, Zul-Aman, Endtime, Hour of Twilight, and Well of Eternity. And do the raids Bastion of Twilight, Blackwing's Descent, and Throne of Four Winds. And you can also do Baradin Hold and some stuff in Tol Barad if you like. This is not really important for the story, but it's nice, you know. I really like the little haunted island and the haunted prison, so I would play this as well, but this is optional story. Then you can watch the trailer for patch 4.1, and after that do Zul'Gurub and Zul-Aman dungeons. Now Zul'Gurub and Zul-Aman used to be raids in the Burning Crusade, which you can't really do anymore, so if you want to see the story for them, you can watch someone do them online or something, because the story of patch 4.1 kind of ties into it, but it's not really essential. So, you know, just look up the stories of Zul'Gurub and Zul-Aman online before doing these dungeons. Now we're back to some more books. We got Thrall, Twilight of the Aspects by Christy Golden, and also book Wolfheart by Richard A. Knack. Both fantastic books taking place during Cataclysm. We are continuing with Cataclysm, doing stuff in-game. After you read those, you can watch the trailer for patch 4.2 and start the Molten Front questline from Matoclaw quest called Opening the Door. And after doing a little bit of that, you can do the raid Firelands. After you finish Firelands, you can read the short story Charge of the Aspects by Matt Burns. Then we're back to the game, watch the trailer for patch 4.3, and then you can go to the Caverns of Time and do the Cataclysm max level 4.3 dungeons, so End Time, Will of Eternity, Hour of Twilight, and Dragon Soul. Now these all take place right after each other, so you can do them in that order and see the complete picture of the story. Now, if you have a rogue, that would be nice, because you can then do the legendary rogue questline that started from the Dragon Soul raid from the Verminous Temple, from Lord Devrestraj. This story continues basically the story of that one Black Dragon egg in Badlands, which you know if you played the entirety of Eastern Kingdoms already on 1 to 60 on Cataclysm. So, then we are back to more books, as always. So first we got the Dawn of the Aspects book by Richard A. Knack. Covers the story of the dragons and is a nice epilogue to the story of Cataclysm. We got Jaina Proudmoore, Tides of War by Christy Golden, another fantastic book. And we have the YouTube series of Shao Hao. Now these YouTube series now come out before every expansion, so this was the first one. Watch every chapter of it, just to get into the lore of Pandaria. Then we can go ahead to Mists of Pandaria, watch the cinematic for Mists of Pandaria, do the starting zone for Pandaren, then you do Chromie Time, you go to Pandaria 1 to 60 on Horde and Alliance, as always, do all the dungeons, do all the raids besides Throne of Thunder and Siege of Orgrimmar, and then you can watch the patch 5.1 trailer, and then you can read the book Vol'jin Shadows of the Horde by Michael Stackpole. After this we are back in the game. You can watch the trailer for patch 5.2, do the Thunder Calls questline, and then you can do the Throne of Thunder raid, watch the 5.3 and 5.4 trailers. 5.3 didn't really add much, that's why we're just watching the trailer, and then you will do the Siege of Orgrimmar raid, and you can also in the meantime do the optional Timeless Isle, which is started with the questline A Flash of Bronze from your faction's shrine at max level, or rather at max level in Pandaria. It's probably like level 45 right now, it keeps changing all the time, so either way, when you get to 60 you will be able to do it. Also, please note that the ending of the Siege of Orgrimmar raid will be different depending on if you play Horde or the Alliance. Both are canon, they just show a different point of view, so be sure to do the raid on both. Very important to note is that there was a legendary questline that tied into the whole story of Mists of Pandaria. However, as of writing this, it's removed and there is absolutely no way to play it unless they released Mists of Pandaria Classic or something. For this I recommend watching Noble87's video covering it if you want to know it completely, or just read up on it on Wowpedia or something. Now we got a bunch of optional Mists of Pandaria short stories. We got Strength of Steel by Raphael Ahad, Quest of Pandaria series by Sarah Pine, Lily's Travel Journal, Trial of the Red Blossoms by Cameron Dayton, Bleeding Sun by Matt Burns, The Blank Scroll by Gavin Jugan's Fire, Over Water by Ryan Quinn, The Jade Hunters by Matt Burns, and The Untamed Valley by Robert Brooks. Now these stories add a little bit to the overall story of Mists of Pandaria, but they are not essential. We also have the Traveler series by Weissman and Rue, which is also kind of optional. Now we're back to the more, mainline books. So we got War Crimes by Christy Golden. After reading that, you want to read the short story Hellscream by Robert Brooks. Then we got some comic books. We got Gul'dan and the Stranger by Nielsen, Horley, and Robbins. We got the Black Hand comic book by Brooks, Horley, and Robbins. Another comic book we will be reading is Blood and Thunder by Ahad, Horley, and Robbins. Then we got two short stories. The first one is Code of Rule by Ryan Quinn and Apocrypha by Matt Burns. Then we got another YouTube series we will be watching called Lords of War. And after this we can watch the cinematic trailer for Warlords of Draenor. Now when you play Warlords of Draenor you go Chromie Time, 1 to 60 on Alliance and Horde do Draenor, do the High Mall raid, do the Blackrock Foundry raid, watch the trailers for patches 6.1, 6.2, do all the dungeons, then you can go to Tanan Jungle and do the Hellfire Citadel raid. As in Mists of Pandaria, in Warlords of Draenor there was a legendary questline that is not in the game anymore, no way to play it, so again I recommend watching a video about it or reading up on it online. Then we got the Harbingers YouTube series. After that, we got the audio short story called Tomb of Sargeras by Robert Brooks, narrated by Stephen Pacey. We got the Legion cinematic teaser, and after that, we got the Legion cinematic trailer. So there were 2 short cinematics for Legion. Then we got some comics that we will be reading. First is Magni Fault Lines by Matt Burns and Ludo Lullaby. Then we got Nightborn, Twilight of Suramar by Matt Burns and Ludo Lullaby. Then we got A Mountain Divided by Robert Brooks and David Gegg. And lastly, Anduin, Son of Wolf by Robert Brooks and Neskane. Now we got another short story here called Dark Mirror by Steve Danuser. Now we are back in Legion. So for Legion, first thing you will be doing is the Demon Hunter starting zone, as it takes place during the Burning Crusade. Now it's time to Chromie time and do Legion, do the starting zones, Stormheim, Azuna, Val'Sharah and High Mountain in any order you like. Then do the dungeons associated with them. Now class hall campaigns are important, and there is a different class hall campaign for every class. So if you want to see the full story, you will do every class hall campaign. Now some of these are more important to the story, some are less, but most of them are referenced later in the expansion or the expansions that follow the Legion. Now do the class hall campaigns up to Broken Shore. So before leaving to Broken Shore, you will want to do the whole Suramar Insurrection questline, do the Emerald Nightmare raid, the Trial of Valor raid, and lastly the Nighthold raid. Then you will watch the trailer for patch 7.1 and do the new Karazhan dungeon. And then you can watch the trailer for patch 7.2, and then you can head to Broken Shore, do further class hall stuff, and then finally you can do the Tomb of Sargeras raid. While doing Broken Shore on Alliance, be sure to look out for this quest just off the island, which is an important story quest for Anduin's story. Now we got another audio short story here called 1,000 Years of War by Robert Brooks, narrated by Stephen Pacey. We are continuing with Legion, so you will want to do the Hand of Fate questline for Argus, and now do all chapters here, and then you can do the Antorus raid. There was an epilogue questline, but you can't do this anymore, so look up the Silithus 7.3.5 questline. There were 2 cutscenes for it, for Horde and the Alliance. So now that we're done with Legion, you will go ahead and read another book called Before the Storm by Christy Golden. Now there were 2 pre-patch questlines that were in-game for BFA, but these are removed. But they are now covered in 2 short stories, so what I recommend doing is watching them online, and after that reading the 2 short stories. So the first one is Elegy by Christy Golden, the short story, and A Good War by Robert Brooks, another short story. These books cover the burning of Teldrassil and the siege of Undercity. Then you can watch the Battle for Azeroth cinematic trailer, which takes place during the siege of Undercity. Then we got some comic books, Jaina Reunion by Robinson, Cavallani and Tenderini, Magni the Speaker by Matt Burns and Suckling, Windrunner 3 Sisters by Danuser, Golden, Robinson, Bifulco and Chang, Mechagon by Matt Burns and Mickey Montlaw, and then finally we got the YouTube series Warbringers. So for BFA, you want to Chromie time to BFA, do Kultiras, do Zandalar, follow the war campaign chapters, do the dungeons, do Uldir and Battle for the Tsar Alora raids. You can now go into Nazjatar by doing the quest Send the Fleet, given by Nathanos for the Horde, and get Greymane for the Alliance when you do enough of the war campaign. Do the chapters there, and also do the Eternal Palace raid. You can also go into Mechagon, which is kind of optional, but you know that was the patch questline, with the questline started in your capital city. After doing Mechagon, you can also do the Mega Dungeon there, Operation Mechagon, and after that you will do the 8.3 questline, which can be started after beating enough of the war campaign, and after doing that short 8.3 questline, you can do the Nyalotha raid. There was a short questline called On the Trail of the Black Prince between 2 patches, but it got removed, so you can look it up online. It's nice, it's the first real in-game mention of the Dragon Isles, so it kind of sets up that story later on. We got the book Shadows Rising by Madeline Rowe. There was also a questline in the game taking place after this book, being a direct continuation to the story started in the book. It's out of the game now, so you can just watch the For Teldrassil cutscene to see how it ends. We got some short stories, A Moment in Verse by Madeline Rowe, Terror by Torchlight by Christy Golden, which is another short story, We got World of Warcraft Exploring Azeroth, The Eastern Kingdoms by Christie Golden, an amazing book. We got We Ride Forth by Robert Brooks, which is a short story setting up Shadowlands slowly. And then we got the Afterlives series on YouTube. Now, before the story of Shadowlands, you should make a Death Knight character on a Pandaren or any of the allied races to see the new starting zone. Then you can watch the Shadowlands cinematic trailer. After that, you will be doing Shadowlands, so talk to Chromie, do Chromie time to Shadowlands, do all of the first 4 zones, so Bastion, Maldraxxus, Ardenville, and Revendreth, and associated dungeons. Keep up with all 4 Covenant campaigns, which you have to do if you want to see the complete picture. Do all 4 of them, and after doing all of that, do the Castle Nathria raid. While you're doing that, you can read the book Grimoire of the Shadowlands by Sean Copeland and Steve Danuser. If you're trekking through the Shadowlands and you're missing Azeroth a little bit, at this point I recommend reading a book called Folk and Fairy Tales of Azeroth. Now, most of these are just, as the name says, just fairy tales. They don't have specific chronology, but they do add more depth to the world of Warcraft. Now, continuing with the Shadowlands, you can go ahead to Korthia when prompted after finishing enough of the Covenant campaign. But, first do the complete Covenant campaign and then you will be able to head to Korthia easy in the Maw. Do some quests there, you have a lot of chapters, and do the Sanctum of Domination raid after finishing all those chapters. After doing that, you will unlock Zereth Mortis, being prompted by the quest Call of the Primus. After finishing first 3 chapters of Korthia campaign, then you can go ahead to Zereth Mortis, do quests there, and finally do the Sepulchre of the First One's raid, and then you can do the epilogue chapter of the campaign. And with that, we are done with the Shadowlands. As a nice epilogue to the Shadowlands, we got the book Sylvanas by Christie Golden. Then we got World of Warcraft Exploring Azeroth, Kalimdor by Sean Copeland, and then also World of Warcraft Exploring Azeroth, Northrend by Alex X. Now there is a 3-year time skip until Dragonflight, so after that we will be watching the Dragonflight cinematic trailer. Then we will read the short story The WoW Eternal by Christie Golden, which continues the short story A Moment in Verse. And we got the Legacies series on YouTube. Now we're going into Dragonflight, so first do the Dracthyr starting zone, then go ahead to Dragon Isles, do all the quests here, farm Renown and do all the campaigns, all the dungeons except the Dawn of the Infinite. After doing enough of Renown stuff and doing the campaign, you can go ahead and do Vault of the Incarnates raid, which is the first raid of Dragonflight. Then you can go ahead and start unlocking Zaralek Caverns. While you're in Zaralek Caverns, do the campaign here. Then you can go ahead and do the Aberrus raid. After this, you can go back to Taldraszus, do Dawn of the Infinite questline, then do the Dawn of the Infinite dungeon, and finally we got a new questline that's, as of recording of this video, the latest questline, which is Fury Incarnate, which is started from Valdrakken. Now that's complete story so far. We got a couple of stuff that's upcoming that we know of. We got the War of the Scaleborn book. We will also have an encyclopedia style book regarding dragons. We also have patch 10.2 Guardians of the Dream coming out soon, and soon enough we will be having an announcement regarding the new expansion, so 11.0. Now there are 3 books that I didn't put anywhere in this list, and those are the 3 Chronicle volumes. Now these volumes basically recap the story of World of Warcraft from the creation of the universe all up until Cataclysm. What's important for these books is that they're written from the point of view of the Titans, so not everything you read here will be 100% accurate. Now, this is a nice recap for the whole story that we just talked about. There is a lot here that's not mentioned in any other lore or any other book, so I recommend reading these after, you basically go through the entire story. If you do not want to read this, what you absolutely must do is go over the cosmology chart, because this cosmology chart is getting more and more referenced in game, and it seems to be the basis for future lore, so be sure to at least check that out. Now that's all the story for so far. There is a lot of it, so let's just quickly go through how you can get all of this stuff. So first let's start with the games. So Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, its expansion and the manuals for both can be obtained through Good Old Games. They're usually bundled together for a nice discount, so this is the best place to get them, and you can get them digitally, you can download them as much as you like. especially if your computer is like mine and you don't have a disk reader. So this is the best way to get it. For Warcraft 3, I already said I recommend getting Warcraft 3 Reforged on Battle.net. But if you really want to play classic games, you can buy Reforged and just play with classic graphics, or you have to find the discs for Reign of Chaos and the Burning Crusade on eBay or Amazon or somewhere like that. It's kind of hard to find these days. For World of Warcraft, that's, just go to Battle.net, subscribe to WoW. You probably know this already if you're watching this video. Now let's cover the books. The books are obtained through your local bookstore. You can find some of them on Blizzard Gear Store. A good source for the books is Forbidden Planet in Europe. If you live in a larger city, you can probably find them in some bigger bookstores. I know a bookstore here that sells a couple of them. So you will mostly be ordering these online. Another good way, really good way to get it, some people don't like this, but I personally do enjoy consuming books this way, is audiobooks on Audible. Audible almost has every Warcraft book. They don't have every single one, but they do have most of them. And it's a good way to, go through a book while riding a bike or something. By the way, this video is not sponsored by Audible, but that would be nice. So Audible, please, give me a call and I'll shout you out more. Now we can go ahead and talk about comics. The comic books, the ones that released up to Warlords of Draenor, were all printed physically. I don't think they have digital versions, so you would have to get them through the same, sources, through a bookstore, through Amazon, through eBay, stuff like that, depending on where you live. Forbidden Planet also has some of them. This is also regarding manga as well. Now, all the comic books that came during Warlords of Draenor and after Warlords of Draenor are completely free, so that's something to, keep in mind. Short stories can all be found on the Warcraft website. I will link it down below. You can read every single one there. And also for the audio short stories, they're also both on, World of Warcraft website, which I will link also down below. And YouTube series, they're all, on YouTube, so you can go ahead and watch them there. Now that's everything for today. That's everything so far. It's been almost 30 years of World of Warcraft lore. It will be next year. So that's kind of crazy to think about. This lore exists longer than I've been alive. So that's crazy. So you kind of need a PhD to get all of this stuff. There is a lot of literature here. I feel like there is more books here than I had to read during all 4 of my college years. So it is what it is. It's a great lore. I really enjoy it. Warcraft universe is my favorite fictional universe. So I hope you enjoy it as I have. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section below. As I said before, there will be a big Reddit post that will be linked down below, which has links to everything, and it's kind of easier to go through, because you can just click on stuff and it will link it to like a video and stuff. So if you don't want to watch the video again, you can go ahead and check out that Reddit post. But as I said, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them down below. Feel free to subscribe if you want more videos like this, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye bye.